I'm Mark Chappell. I started out as a journalism instructor here, then I taught developmental English and Comp 1.
I'm Chris Coble. I started out here as a student and actually played baseball as a Laker, and then started in 2010, and now I'm Director of Institutional Research.
Tell us about your connection to NPC and when your journey began. Tell us a little bit of that story.
Okay, I was hired, I believe, fall 1990. I was the first and, well, really the only full-time journalism instructor the college ever had. National Park was Garland County Community College then, and oddly enough, for a two-year college, we had a student newspaper. That was pretty rare in the state. I believe the only other school that had one was North Ark in Harrison. So I attempted to build a journalism program, which was daunting because journalism typically only has about 2% of the graduating majors, so it was a tiny little program, but we did pretty well. We competed with four-year colleges in the Arkansas Press Association, and generally we were about fourth in the state out of about 15 papers, so we did pretty well. I probably ought to mention the first editor of the student newspaper back in 1974 was Roger Fox, who I think is still on the faculty here. He's probably the old man of the faculty now. I want to be sure and get that in for Roger. Four-year colleges loved us. We supplied them all with editors, with experienced editors, and right before the program went away, we had about 8 different college editors in the state. So after the program, it really just wasn't feasible. It was, we're just too small. It's hard to make one go at a two-year college. So they eventually did away with it, and they then shifted me over to other writing classes, primarily the developmental writing, and I was, for a while, the only developmental writing instructor here. And I spent the next 25 years doing that.
My journey began in, I believe it was 1992. I transferred in from a four-year school to play baseball here. We played the year, and during the year, that was the year they decided to cut sports. So I stayed another year to finish up some academics and then transferred back to SAU. But then I restarted my journey here in around 2010 as an advisor for Career Pathways. And then after a few years, I was named division chair of LAD. That's where Mark and I began our friendship. And then actually, he was on my hiring committee for Career Pathways.
Yeah, I'm sort of to blame for him.
And then for the last 7 years, I've been the director of institutional research, and it's been a wonderful ride at the college.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard that athletics was being cut, and what do you think about them coming back a few years ago?
It was devastating back then. One of the first conversations I had with Dr. Hogan was he wanted to bring sports back, and that was actually, it made me really happy, and I'm glad to see where it is now. It's probably bigger now than it really ever was, because community college sports at that time in the state was not well publicized.
What do you guys think sets National Park College apart from other campuses?
Mm-hmm. I'd have to say probably the faculty actually care and pay attention to the students' needs. It's just not like that at every college in the state, and I've had several students over the years remark about that after they transferred to a four-year college. Their experience there often wasn't what it was here. They were able to talk with us, and we tended to work with the students. Now, part of that may have been that we were in the Learning Acceleration Division, and that was kind of one of our main focuses. But I think that's true across the disciplines here on campus.
Yeah, and to echo that is just the caring attitude of campus, and how many, so many times I've heard from tons of students that they wish they could finish their degree here. Now, you know, we have that option with the 2+2s and UAM and SAU on our campus to finish their 4-year degrees.
If you guys could describe MPC in like 2 or 3 words, what would y'all say?
It's a place that students can come and get what they need to succeed. A community college is completely different than a 4-year institution in that you're often giving students basic skills, basic education, things that in some cases they may have simply missed when they were in public school. So we're, in a way, community colleges are sort of on the front lines of education. We're kind of the shock troops. And, you know, we don't have the luxury of being in an ivory tower. We have to kind of get down and dirty and work with students as they are, rather than some mythical level that we would like to think they should be at. We try to elevate them as high as we can instead of, you know, expecting them to be at a certain level.
You know, if I had to do 3 words, is we build dreams. Working in career pathways in LAD is, both of us grew up in families that were a long line of educators and kind of expected for us to go to school. But when you work in those 2 areas, you realize how difficult it is for people, and building dreams for people that may have never thought they could go to school because of one tragedy in their family, to their education background's not very strong. And, you know, I always say my favorite day of the year is graduation, because you can see where all these students that you've worked with personally and how far they had to come, especially when you know them personally, and held their hand through tragedies in their life, through tests that they didn't think they could pass. And that's probably why we've been educators our whole life.
That's absolutely correct. We see students that are first-time college students, that students that struggled in high school for a variety of reasons. It may have nothing to do with academics. It may have to do with a home situation or a physical disability. And yeah, I think our students appreciate the education more than the traditional, what most people think of as a college student, you know, the typical 4-year college student. So that is probably the most rewarding thing that we had.
What changes have you witnessed over your time here?
Gosh, there's been a lot. Name changes, merger with the vocational college, physical plant is almost completely different. Most of the buildings had flat roofs when I first came here. Not a good plan for Arkansas. Those have all been changed out and leaks fixed. Changes in the student body. When I first started, I think the average age of students was 27. And it was, I do remember my first day teaching was a little shocking because all the desks had ashtrays on them because smoking was still allowed in the classroom. They had to put them out when the class started, but you know, you'd walk in and people were puffing away. So some changes are kind of cultural changes. The college has certainly grown a great deal. And the makeup of the student body is constantly changing. And Chris could probably talk more about that.
Yeah, from when I started in '92 to now, it's night and day. I mean, where the science building is, that was our practice field for baseball. It was a softball field. And then where nursing was the tennis courts. I can remember as far back as when the construction of campus, because my mom was very close to Dr. Fisher because he was superintendent at the Hot Springs School District, and we kind of come out every once in a while and kind of see the growth, and it was fun to watch from the late 70s to now. You know, I think there was a trailer on campus that somebody lived in for security. And coming all the way now we have security cameras, now we have dorms, the student commons. It was faculty have their own divisions where their offices are, where before everybody was kind of all over campus. So it's been fun to watch the changes on campus.
From y'all's perspective, what has changed about the student experience and what still remains the same?
For me, it's the what's still the same is, as Mark said earlier, the faculty caring. What's really changed on the student perspective is, you know, you take COVID out of the way, there's a lot more things for students to do on campus. When I was a student here, we really didn't have anything. You had somebody like Coach Arman who would have a softball team. That was our intramurals, pretty much. We had some more early on, but when I was here, that was kind of dying out. But, you know, the faculty caring has never changed.
Yeah, the availability of facilities, new majors, more student activities, more emphasis on that. As far as the student body goes, it's in a constant state of flux. We're getting more younger students at National Park now. Well, I mentioned the average age was much older. It wasn't uncommon to have students that were in their 60s. I remember one year I was here, we had 150 wheelchair-bound students on campus. And I think that was before the campus was made fully handicapped accessible. And you can imagine with the hills and everything, what a chore that was for people. But that's kind of life in any college. It's always, the student body's always changing, different needs. That's what makes it fun. If you can describe that as fun, constantly reinventing what you do.
I think years ago for the younger students, this is where you had to go if you got in trouble at a four-year school. Now we've turned it into the first destination for a lot of high school students, because we typically get 25% of the graduating class of all the Garland County schools. So we've become more of a first destination instead of, like we used to call it when I was in high school, G-Try High, because we all had a high school reunion at some point during our four-year career.
Well, students from the four-year colleges come here to pick up classes a lot more than they did. I remember I was in college when Garland County started, and you know, it was not viewed the most favorable of colleges. It was, you know, sort of underwater basket weaving was the kind of course we thought was taught here, and that's completely flipped. And we have a lot more respect, I think, from the four-year colleges now.
Yeah.
Have you guys been to any of the new MPC athletic events? And if you have, what was it like?
I have. I've been to baseball, softball, and I've been to some basketball games, especially early on. The energy that is there is probably the biggest difference. You know, the last year, once it was announced we were doing away with athletics, the crowds disappeared, and it was really hard as an athlete to not have anybody but your family. But now it's the energy, it's the community support, and how everybody is behind it. And now that baseball and softball play more at Majestic Park, you're seeing more of the community because it's in the central part of the city, and the support that you get from the true baseball community of Hot Springs is amazing.
I have not really been to too many athletic events. I've been retired for 6 years now. I had been going to the basketball games, and I had gone to some games before I taught here. Back when a lot of the college classes were downtown and they played downtown in the convention center. And they had quite a following back then. I think part of the problem has been we're so far removed from downtown that we lost a lot of fan base when they moved out here.
You know, I can remember the downtown going to convention center with my grandfather, who was a basketball coach, to watch. And, you know, the stories Don Harris tells about how the basketball court came about. I think it was actually bought from the Boston Celtics, wasn't it? The
I believe
original
that's
court.
correct.
And it was movable, and it was in the convention center. You know, the whole story of that, and the parquet floor kind of told a story of how the basketball community and sports community is actually real small, and, you know, even back then, able to get a floor from Boston and have it at a community college.
Pretty historic. The Celtics were the team
And-
back in those days as well.
And it matched our colors.
That's correct. I don't know if that has any bearing on it, but
Yeah, because
it might.
Wonder where that old floor went.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
Because we built the gym and all that kind of went away when the gym was built on campus. And
Well,
then you kind of saw the crowd go down a little bit
That
too.
floor, how old was it? It was old when we got it. So.
It should be in the Hall of Fame, and it was in Hot Springs Convention Center.
Is there any faculty or staff that had a big impact on you guys?
For me, there was a few. One was Jim Castaldi. I had him for several classes, and then probably Van Davis. Had him for a few classes. They had a large impact on molding me as a student, and even though my family were educators, they also helped push me towards wanting to be an educator and help students.
I've got to give Chris props on this. When he took over Learning Acceleration Division, his style really meshed with pretty much all of us in the division. And we developed a real collegial relationship, which was my fondest memories of teaching were in LAD. We were like a family. We did a lot of things over meals. We frankly ate all the time. I think I gained about 8 pounds. Some of those women could really cook. Linda Franklin, oh my gosh. But in any case, I hate to do it with him just sitting right here. But I'm going to use Chris as my best influence.
For us, those of us who don't know, can you tell us what LAD is?
Learning Acceleration Division, it was the developmental courses. We housed all the developmental courses, and we were in our own division. We started off developing the Comp Without classes, and then we started and we redesigned math. And the end goal, our end goal is the way we have college algebra as a co-requisite with a Review 1 and Review 2. And it's gone through a process over the last several years.
That's, like most education, is a moving target and something that's constantly changing. It was primarily English, math, and reading. I guess mostly math, because that seemed to be the one that
That's
students
the
struggled with the most. Of course, English, we could teach that. Yeah, I fancy we did a pretty good job with that. We sort of pioneered the ALP classes in the state, and had a lot of success with those. They're not called ALP anymore.
Yeah,
I think
they're still
called,
ALP.
I thought they were co-recs now.
Well,
or
they're
something.
considered a co-rec, but it's still called out.
What do you hope to see for the future of MPC students?
Continue growth. Continue growth to the point, our on-campus growth, I think with dorms, I think is a good move for us. We will attract more students than we wouldn't have gotten any other way, especially from out of state. Growing our brand, coming out with the Nighthawk and rebranding ourselves in about 2014 was a very smart move. It's kind of given the community something to root for, because it's really tough in the state of Arkansas to get your market share with the Razorbacks. So branding it in our community and growing it the way we are, in the next few years, I think we'll reap from all of that. We'll reap the benefits.
I could see the college growing into a four-year institution. Although we will, in doing so, we may lose a little bit of the community college vibe, and again, it will probably alter the goals of the college and how the college works. But I believe Hot Springs has been ready for a four-year college for, oh gosh, decades. And I think National Park will eventually probably get there.
Do you guys have any funny or interesting stories from your time here you'd like to share?
Well, part of my funny, well, there's one as funny as a athlete and funny as a division chair. Talking with Rich Thompson, you talk about different things that happen when you play sports and all of that. I think my favorite memory, though, of playing sports is Garland County had a Bluebird bus that was green and white. Not all the seats were bolted down. And you'd go across the railroad tracks, or the bus driver would hit the brakes on a road trip, and everybody ended up in the floor. And we always laughed about it because it was like the Bad News Bears were coming to town. But we got along well, and we had fun, and we drove that Bluebird bus all the way to Pensacola and back twice. So we had a lot of fun with that. I think as an employee, my favorite memory is the day the deer went loose in the library and jumped through the window. And I can remember one of the secretaries, Alicia Sorrells, was downstairs or in her office, and they all stuck their head out thinking it sounded like a gunshot, and it was a deer running straight through the library, all through it, and they finally got it out. I think it was in there for about 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, easily. Oh gosh, how can I limit this? I guess I ought to tell about Ashland's runaway car. Ashland Dugan was another English faculty that taught with us in LAD. And Ashland was kind of noted for having things happen to her. And one day, somebody from the campus crew came in and told her that she had left her car in gear at the top of the hill, and it had rolled down the entire parking lot, managed to miss about 30 cars, and actually parked itself better than it was originally parked.
Yep.
Maybe a little nerve-wracking for Ashland, but
That was funny.
What is your earliest memory of college? What can you tell us about that time?
well, I think I've already told about the ashtrays. That's kind of the earliest memory. I do remember the student center was, if you could call it that, was a room shared with a bookstore with extremely low ceilings, a blue haze of cigarette smoke, a couple of pool tables, and a pinball machine. It was kind of like a dive bar.
Mine would be showing up, when I transferred in a semester to play baseball, showing up to the pit registration in the gym, which I think every student should go through. And then you'd stand in line, and my earliest memory of Jim Castaldi is his class is closed, and he'd just flip over the flip chart and it'd say closed on it. That's probably my funniest memory.
There's
One of them.
There's nothing funny about that.
No, pit registration.
You're the faculty sitting there, it was torture.
Yeah.
It was awful. It was hot as well.
Do you guys have any information and any history y'all can share with us about the beginning of the college?
Well, I know the college began in 1973, and the campus was built, as I understand it, out here in 1977. So for the first 4 years, the classes were, excuse me, were catch as catch can, wherever they could find a place. I know that one art class took place over a bar downtown, on the second floor over over some relatively sleazy bar. So to get to class, you had to go through the bar.
And I know some classes were held in different places downtown, and then at the time it was called Southwest Junior High, Mount Hot Springs Middle School. They had classes there. It was spread all over town. You know, that's the earliest that I have. You know, but I know a lot of the, you know, a lot of people that were on this campus for years were here for years. And at the 40th, I think there was 10 or 12 people that came back for the 40th that talked about the early days that, and you know, some of the amazing stories about furniture coming from Hot Springs School District to, you know, just how they had to operate to get through.
Yeah, we probably ought not to tell how that furniture was obtained.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the best memories, some of the memories that I have, and really, you know, I truly think, being a former athlete, that what really built the early days of the college was having sports downtown, having basketball downtown for the community. You know, we were pretty successful for several years, and you know, Ken Cook had tennis, and they were nationally known to, you know, baseball was growing, and then basketball was really good under Coach Arman for several years.
I believe they had golf and maybe swimming at one point.
Yeah, I think they tried everything at one point.
What does MPC turning 50 mean to you, and what would you say it means to the college?
Well, what it means to me is I'm really old now. Teaching's kind of funny in that you're kind of the same place. The students kind of stay the same. They're all the same age, but they keep moving and you don't. So it's time passes oddly when you teach. It doesn't seem that long ago that I started teaching here, and that was about 33 years ago, which is a pretty good while ago. So of course there have been plenty of changes.
You know, for me, I've kind of aged with the campus because I'm 50 and the campus is turning 50. So I've really kind of aged with the campus, and I've pretty much been a part or around the campus my whole life, because there are 14 family members that's gone to school here, at least involved in concurrent or high school tech programs. So this campus has always meant a lot to my family.
I would actually, I have a question more about your time with baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe, maybe paint a picture of what baseball looked like here in terms of the jerseys and the atmosphere at games?
You know, the atmosphere at games at that time it's not the same atmosphere, it's kind of different. Our jerseys, you know, I've got one of the jerseys in my office. It looked like the 1970s Oakland A's. We kind of had a we are family kind of attitude like the Pirates did, but we looked exactly like the Oakland A's. The games were fun, not as well attended. We did have a following. A lot of former athletes from the community would come out. But one year I played sports here, we only played, I think it was 9 games in the state of Arkansas because of flooding. All the fields, the old boys club, which is now Majestic Park, was flooded, couldn't have games. Plus we also shared it with other high schools. Then the Lake Hamilton Optimist Field was flooded, had issues, and we also had to share it. So we traveled. So the one year we only played 9 games in the state, and half of them were in Harrison. So when we played North Art. But it was fun. You know, we had parent support just like they do now. That hasn't really changed. You know, at that time, for me, community college baseball has really evolved. Back then, it was probably more like what you would consider minor league baseball. You stayed in the cheaper hotels and all that, where it's grown, and now junior college baseball is extremely important to the pipeline to the 4-year